connect makers to funders. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we started doing webinars and live streams for our hardware meetups, and it's really been great for expanding our reach and our community. We've done a handful of different events, some of them online and some of them hybrid events. The most recent one was the Intelligent and Connected Cities that we did in September, and that's also at this location. Last year, we did our first in-person event in over a year, which is the State of Vancouver Tech post-pandemic, and other previous events have included making a positive impact through emerging tech and welcoming our robotic overlords. Just to give you a bit of background about MistyWest, we are a hardware product development consultancy that exists to create an inclusive and prosperous global community enabled by technology. Some of our past projects have included polar bear trackers for the World Wildlife Fund, and we are also working on creating remote sensors for a company that is harnessing the power of cosmic rays from space to conduct ethical mining. And yeah, today's event is the future of farming, a conversation about AgTech. And we have a bunch of distinguished panelists joining us today. I'm going to go over their names, but after I hand the mic over to Tony, we'll get everybody's kind of full bio. We have Juan Shi joining us from the 51 Food and AgTech Fund. Roman Kozak, co-founder and CTO of Verdi. Vincent Clerc, VP of Engineering at Terramera, and Michael Burton, the Director of Engineering at Semios. And our moderator for today is Tony Jackson. He is a business developer at MistyWest, and I know that I asked you last time about what was your engineering, your mechatronics? Mechanical engineer, yeah. So tonight's schedule is the panel discussion will go until about 7 o'clock. We'll do a 15-minute Q&A with people from the audience here, as well as anybody who has anything that they'd like to add online, because we are live streaming this event, and we have around 45 to 50 people joining us online tonight, which is really great. We'll do some brief thank yous after the Q&A, and then you will be free to network and mingle after that. So I would like to thank you for coming to tonight's event, and I'm going to hand it over to Tony.
Alrighty. Hello, folks. Yeah, as Madison said, thank you for coming out to the AgTech panel. I'm going to take a seat here if y'all want to as well. Is that me? Okay. Yeah, so to start, Madison gave a quick intro there that I'm Tony, I'm one of the business developers, but none of you are here to see me. You're here to see all of our fantastic panelists and learn from their wisdom and expertise. So if I can start this off with introductions. Michael, can I start off with you? Just a quick intro with, what it is you're working on and what your background is.
Sure. So I'm Michael Burton. I'm Director of Engineering at Semios.
Is that mic on? Sir.
I'm assuming it's on. I'm talking about otherwise. No?
I don't know. Hey, Robin?
Check.
Yeah.
Mic check. I can just talk really loud too. Sure.
Okay. Oh, that sounds way better. Yeah, so I'm Michael Burton. I'm Director of Engineering at Semios. I've been with the company for about 7 years. Started there as an embedded developer. We do precision data-driven farming, primarily in permanent crops. We do a lot of IoT, kind of controls and monitoring. We also do pheromone delivery for mating disruption. And recently with a few acquisitions, we're also doing controls for water, and also have moved into kind of the operational planning space with the acquisition of AgWorld out of Perth.
All right, here. Yeah. Okay, so it's working back here.
So, hi everybody. My name is Vincent Clerc, so I'm the VP of Engineering for Terramera. I've been with the company for 2 years now. I'm French, so before coming to Vancouver 2 years ago, I used to design robots in Europe for SoftBank Robotics. So I'm the maker of one of the maker of Pepper, the robot. I don't know if you guys know that humanoid robots. Before that, I've been operating in all different kinds of environment. I've been a CTO for an aerospace company designing mission critical recorders for military plane. That has nothing to do with AgTech. And then more recently, I joined Terramera. My background is in mechanical design, electronic design. I have a PhD in robotics and signal processing. And for Terramera, I lead the technical development of all the technologies of Terramera, sensors, robots, autonomous rovers, these kind of things. Terramera is also involved in green chemistry, so we have a whole part of the company that is designing and creating organic chemistry to help inputs actually to penetrate the cells of the plants. And the other half of the company is more onto AgTech, so developing technologies for soil health monitoring, these kind of things, soil mapping, carbon mapping.
Hey everyone, I'm Roman Kozak from Verdi. I'm the CTO and co-founder, and we are an AgTech startup. So of these two big guys here, we're the only startup. And at Verdi, what we're looking to do is climate-proof farms with an initial focus on irrigation. So we found the problem of irrigation inefficiency a very compelling problem to solve. Between 70 and 90% of all freshwater usage actually goes to agriculture, and we're looking to change that. We're also looking to help growers meet their sustainability goals, reduce their risk by managing their irrigation efficiently. So over the past 3 years of working at Verdi, I've had the opportunity to go speak to a lot of customers, visit a lot of farms, and try a lot of different technologies and speak to a lot of people about technology. So I hope that some of that experience I can share with everyone today.
Great. My name is Yuan. I'm an investor with the 51 Food and AgTech Fund. We are a $50 million early stage deep tech VC fund investing in AgTech, food tech, and climate-enabled solutions. So today, I'm here to learn. I think at the end of the day, it's really the entrepreneurs doing the heavy lifting, and we are very fortunate to be part of their journey. So look forward to sharing our stories. And the final hat that I wear is I'm an adjunct professor at University of British Columbia, where I teach innovation and entrepreneurship. Just finished teaching today, this afternoon. This is exactly like classroom, like the first row is always vacant. There's always no one taking the first row. So again, thank you for having me. Look forward to the dialogue.
Thanks so much. Can I get a round of applause for all of our panelists here? All right, so I'm going to start this off with what it is that you're excited about. And Yuan, I know you're talking. All good? Talking to a lot of startups and whatnot in your role as principal. What technology or what development do you see as most exciting that's going on in the AgTech space right now?
So there's two layers to the question. Is what excites the fund, so the professional hat that I wear, and I want to also touch on what excites me as a person on a day-to-day basis, and I look forward to hear everyone else's take. So for us, we really wanted to be able to back the breakthrough technologies and innovations. We wanted to go through the hard route in terms of supporting deep tech companies. A lot of the innovations that we're seeing is actually biology and chemistry enabled, so biotech enabled agriculture innovation. The second area that we're looking to is farm innovation. We wanted to go to the front line, to our farmers at the forefront, so that we can help them and enable them and take them with us along the journey of technology commercialization. The third category where we are very interested in is food innovation. So today we hit 8 billion people globally, and in terms of population, how can we continue to feed those people in a healthy, sustainable, and profitable and also affordable way? The final area that we're looking to is automation. So how do we utilize AI, data, machine learning, and IoT in order to accelerate and automate the space? So that is, what interests me and interests us at a fund level. For me personally, I actually wanted to do just to get a sense from the community, from the room here. How many of you have worked or owned or was born and raised on a farm and actually did farm work? Okay, so about 10, 20%. Okay. my personal journey is one where before the fund, I'm an environmental engineer by training. I studied climate when no one was talking about climate. So it's really great to see there's all the momentum about climate in the ecosystem. And then I did investment banking, did mergers and acquisition, lived in the States, lived in the US for many years. The very first thing that I did after I exited from my finance career was I co-owned a farm here in Vancouver. So it's in Lanley, 45 minutes drive from the city, very first time. Actually working on a farm, and really teaches me, it really taught me how small we are as human beings in front of nature, and the kind of humility that we have to always care, regardless, how progressed and advanced that we have developed our technology and AI and automation, but getting hands dirty and that part is still the part that excites me the most. So whether that is education or awareness or investing in technology. So while my personal interest is if there is a educational tech or a business idea that can teach, for example, kids where the food is from, that excites me, because I think it's about our next generation. It's about awareness and education, because if we ask a 5-year-old right now, where does the milk come from? Their answer is very likely Costco or Safeway. And I think, to me personally, that's what excites me, is the educational piece. But as a fund, I've given you the answer in terms of what we see and where we wanted to bet our energy and resources on.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting to hear that you had started a farm there as well. That ties into a question that I want to put out to the crowd here, so any of you jump in on this, of like what, I imagine like from when you're working in the lab and like everything's clean and things are like, you've got a clean signal and whatnot, things are a lot easier. What are some of the lessons that you found in like your prototypes making contact with reality, and like where you thought it would work and it just like has not worked at all?
Well, I think it's like in boxing. You have a plan until you take the first hit, and everything goes through the roof after that. So you have to be very agile and listen to the feedbacks from the users of your technology in order to improve it as much as you can, as fast as you can, so that you can really answer their needs, actually. So that most of the time what we see, we develop early prototypes, we test it with end users, and we collect their feedback, and most of the time it's relevant, and we have to really listen clearly and carefully in order to improve the prototype that we've created. So it's the quality of listening that is very important when you're doing that. And then as an engineer, you might be biased towards technology, and then you stick to your original plan, where actually what's necessary is to listen and incorporate that into your next iteration. It's not always easy, because as I said, you have a plan and you want to go to the end of that plan, but it's a necessary process, actually.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think the rate that you can develop or get that feedback is much slower often in AgTech. So growers are very seasonally driven, and sometimes we have products that growers only use once a year, whether it be a bloom model when the bees are flying, that happens once a year, right? Or when I'm going to harvest, that happens once a year. So you take that feedback, you're going to go back next year to see how your improvements played out, and we're lucky to have some stuff in Australia, so we get twice a year. But that is just the way our planet works, and so unless you're in a greenhouse, or certain crops may have multiple events a year, but for some things you might not be able to get rapid kind of iterations like you would in other tech industries.
And to add on to what Michael said, so yeah, with AgTech, we found that it is a slower process than a lot of other technology and a lot of other industries. What I think has helped us as a startup is to really, spend a long time with the person who's going to be using your technology. And sometimes, that person, they're not the only person. They might be that person at the farm, but there are a lot of other farms, and there are small farms and big farms. So really understanding the full scope of what your product will see. Because you might end up focusing your development on a very small subset of the problem rather than looking at solving the bigger problem. The other thing I want to add too is with AgTech, we found that being modular in your design and the way you deploy your product is also very important. Just because every farm is different, they all have different requirements, so your product needs to be ready to handle that. And I guess I'll give you an example. So we build a valve controller. That's one of our hardware products, and there are many different areas and configurations where you can have these assets like valves and pumps. One of them is above ground where signal strength is excellent, but another area where these valves exist is underground in concrete boxes with a steel lid in the middle of a roadway. So you can imagine the way you, and the boxes underground flood, you should expect them to flood. So you can imagine those two, it's the same product, but you have to make sure to see all of the scenarios that your product will encounter.
Sounds like there's a lot on listening and on getting feedback and like really understanding the problem space in order to find the right solution. What are, like, when you look at sort of maybe what other people in the space are doing, or maybe what other startups are jumping into, where do you see sort of people like the common gotchas, the common pitfalls where people like who are outsiders to the industry try to take a particular approach, or where there's like some miss that they haven't figured out yet? What are sort of the...
So I think there you really have to, we're all used to, in this case here, living in a city, potentially working in a lab or an office. But I feel with agriculture, you have to be very comfortable, and in the early stages of a startup, spending a lot of time on the farm. And if you don't, you're going to miss a lot of things. And you discover things, so I guess it's going back to my old point, but you have to kind of be ready to camp out on the farm for, the early days of the product, be there every day, and, always be asking for feedback. Sometimes they might, loop you into some farm work, but it'll be a learning experience. So, yeah.
And on that, so what would you recommend to, if somebody was starting a startup, how do you get those connections, right? Yuan, I imagine there's the funding ecosystem, but are there also what are they called, accelerators and incubators and ways that people can connect if they want to try to get that experience and find the customers and whatnot? Yeah.
Well, we found academia is a good approach. So, it's very common to go to a farming company, and be greeted by people with master's degrees in agronomy, viticulturalists and soil scientists, or even people that might have done civil engineering for water systems. So all these people do look to academia to try new technology, and that's actually how we got started and got our first customer, Terra Wines, which is Canada's largest wine company, and we've had the opportunity to expand with them, to learn from them. So I guess our way in was academia, and the thing that surprised us is how much education there is in farming. The people who are working and running these farms are very smart people. So it's great to learn from them, and academia is the way in.
Yeah, there's lots of experimental farms, but also if you go to the conferences, we do a lot of stuff in the States, so you can go down into Washington, California, and we're in permanent crops, and there are bigger growers who will experiment on smaller parts of their farm, or the bad parts of their farm. So it's a harder trial for you. Like you'll go in and this is the worst of the worst. This is like, if you can make this work, then maybe you can get more. And so you'll get some growers who are the early innovators kind of in the field, and you can maybe get a trial or getting something going and learn from them. But you just have to build relationships. Ag's very relationship-based, face-to-face, handshaking. And no growers going online and clicking and saying, I want to test that out. It's very relationship-based, and so it's very important to be building those relationships. And if you don't have it, find a founder or a friend who does. Or there's lots of kids who grew up on farms and are in academia as well, and sometimes that's a good in as well. Like we acquired a company, and yeah, he was working at GoPro, but his family was farmers, and he saw what his brother and his father were dealing with, and so he decided I can do some tech around that, and we ended up acquiring them a couple of years ago. So there's many roads in, but it's again face to face, boots on the ground. You need to be in the fields. It's a different tech in that way.
I want to. Oh, go ahead.
So first of all, gentlemen, thank you for coming to the farm roll. Appreciate it. I wanted to answer both of the current question and the previous question, and it's actually a really good segue of what some of the other panelists mentioned is what are some of the biggest pitfalls. And this is my observation in the tech ecosystem after over a decade. Is especially a lot of deep tech companies will try to develop a technology and try to find a solution, try to find a problem to plug that technology. However, it should be the other way around. It should be identify the problem and make sure that is a pinpoint, and then let's provide a painkiller solution to that huge problem that we're facing in the market. And I think especially, it sounds like there's a lot of technical entrepreneurs or director of technology or software engineers here today. I think that is the number one thing I would encourage you to think and pull yourself out of your desk, your laptop, once a day to think, are we doing the right way, which is find the problem and then try to find a solution to solve that problem, or are we doing the other way around? And we've seen so many companies that they may have actually raised a Series A, a really great Series B round, and a lot of money, a lot of cash, but they still couldn't figure out their product market fit. They still couldn't figure out what is the true tick, or what's that true stickiness in the market. So that is if there's one thing that I would recommend, that is the one recommendation. And then in terms of the ecosystem partners and connections and incubators, two people that really, I promised them to give them a shout out. So Creative Destruction Lab, the climate and ag team, so it's two stream that's specifically focused on climate solutions, agriculture solutions. Can I invite Sisu and Liam just to raise your hand, and so that people know where you are? If you're interested in learning about the program, go talk to them. And there's of course a few other accelerators. There's a lot of climate enabled ones. There's agriculture specific ones. I remember Verdi was in. Yes, just that's another example. I think that is a good one. UBC. For all those of you who are UBC affiliated, there's UBC. For SFU affiliated or University of Victoria affiliated, there's specific programs. For example, the Coastal Saving Innovation Center for UVic and Venture Lab for SFU. I think I remember them right. If any of you are from those institutions. Thank you, Venture Connections. And what's your name? Okay, please come and find her if you're interested in knowing more. I'm doing the sales job for everyone. Excellent, thank you. Thank you for correcting. Those are my reactions to both of your questions.
So I just wanted to add a few things on pitfalls that startup I think can encounter. One of them is not understanding the financial pressure from the farmers, the agronomists, the cooperatives you're working with, and assuming that they have a lot of money to spend. It's not the case, and they're under a lot of pressure, especially with the oil price raising, the fertilizers, and the war in Ukraine, and all the stress that it puts on the whole supply chain. That's one thing you need to really understand. Those guys, they have one opportunity every year to do their stuff, and they're under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure from the financial point of view. Another thing is not understanding the return on investment, or pitching the return on investment that is not accurate, and most of the time you will end up with deploying your technology in the first place, and the expected returns are not there after a year or so, and then all of a sudden the farmer is not interested anymore in paying you for that investment, so you end up with like IoTs everywhere in the field. You don't even retrieve them because it's more expensive for you to go back to those fields because you've oversold the technology. So that's another thing. And one other pitfall could be not being able to build that trust. And farmers, agronomists, are people that are that wants to see to believe, actually. So if you can't really have a proof point or show that your technology is actually delivering what it says it should deliver, then you will not get that trust. And without that, you won't be able to actually sell your innovation or your product, even if it's doing the thing that it's doing. But really, people will want to see the technology working with other adopters before adopting it themselves, because everything is kind of a bet when you have only one try every year to do your business. So those are pits that I think you should be aware when you have a startup.
Yeah, that's a really good point on that, and like on the once a year and the financial pressure to nail that it's fail fast gets a little complicated if you've got the harvest on the line there. I want to pivot a little bit here and throw in a question about one of the things that we're really excited about, which is AI processing at the edge, and like especially low power stuff on that. We do have a demo up for like a low power AI vision system thing, but I won't go too far into that. Check that out if you're interested. What do you see as changing in terms of what's possible to sense and to know from what's going on a farm, from being able to put the AI analytics at the edge versus having to try to collect all of the data out and process it?
Well, I think there are a couple things coming together. So one is, lower power electronics, and then also a lot of I'm trying to think of the word, but there are a lot of libraries out there where you can pre-train your model and then load it onto your microcontroller, and so you're not doing any training at the edge. You're just running your model at the edge, and it's quite low power. And the incentive with IoT in agriculture to do that is transmissions are very expensive in terms of power consumption. So, and also if you're looking to do long range and low power transmissions as well, the data rate is often very low. So you're not going to be able to, in a lot of cases, unless your device is expensive and high power, you're not going to be able to send that data back to the internet. So being able to do it on the device is very important. And that's kind of what we've encountered. And the electronics that we use in our controllers, so we've chosen them specifically so that they're set up to do the run machine learning models at the edge, just because we've encountered the challenges in our consideration and tests of sending it for processing elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it really starts opening the door to the automation piece, whether it be control of irrigation or autonomous tractors, sprayers, and things like that. I think one of the pitfalls, not to bring it back to the old conversation, but the adoption of tech's been so difficult because is it usable to the grower? Is it usable to the farmhand who's in the field? And so you can have great tech and great kind of data and tell them this model, you're going to have this risk or this problem, but can they react to it, right? To deploy a sprayer or to get a person out there to do something is very difficult, very challenging. It's a very complex organization when you have all that labor. But as you move more, as labor becomes more and more of an issue and growers look more and more to automation, I think the AI on the edge will help open that door so that then that becomes where a lot of previous companies have crashed and burned because their data and their models aren't usable. I think that will be able to start plugging into those kind of platforms when it comes to automation within the field.
Maybe to open the debate a little bit, there's a debate around should we do everything at the edge, or should we have having a fully distributed network of processing, or do we want to centralize everything in the cloud? And then to come back to your initial question around what excites me in this AgTech domain in the recent months, there are several things actually happening with if you look at Starlink, for example, that brings broadband, low latency, high bandwidth internet connection to remote area, where the question around do we have to process everything at the edge is not relevant anymore. If you can actually upload and download everything from your sensor into the cloud. That and the 5G availability, like I don't know if you followed, but recently John Deere just announced that they're about to privately operate their own 5G network. And so that's huge because they can control the latency, they can control the priority for processing all those sensors. Just as a figure, a fully equipped precision ag tractor with a shank has more than 300 sensors and 150, something like that, actuators. So they have to process between 5 million and 15 million sensors every second. So the only way to enable that is to have control over your network activities and network communication and all that. So Starlink, 5G, all those things are enablers for AgTech actually to expand in the field for real. Like remote area will now have access to that for. If you look at Starlink, it's like $140 a month plus a starting fee of around $800. So that's a cost, but you can mutualize that cost around communities of farmers and actually share the bandwidth and everything. So machine learning, deep learning, using all those sensors information, all that those sensor information is relevant at the edge if you don't have access to those broadband communication. If you have access to those, actually processing it in the field, in the cloud, using Amazon services or Azure Microsoft services is also meaningful. So now you have different opportunities.
Yeah, it's almost like a race between which one's going to get there first, eh?
Yeah,
of like, are we going to get like broadband access everywhere on the planet, or like are we going to get the AI running it? That's cool. That's a neat trade-off.
Yeah. But I think you'll always have both in play, depending on what you need to get done, because it's great to be able to leverage that if you can put a big panel out. But if you're under trees or under the ground, you're not going to solar panel out anywhere, right? So all of a sudden you have to be low power. Or if you're in permanent crops, those trees eat up signal like nobody's business, right? And so that's what Semios has patents around. Len's in the room, he's co-author of that. But early days of Semios a decade ago, that was the big issue, was how do you get the signal out of the trees? And that still is today. We have 5G devices out there experimenting with low orbit satellite. So it opens a lot of doors. It's still very early technology. And I do think you'll have both, and you have to kind of look at what are you trying to solve, and especially with AI on the edge, how quickly do you need to get that answer up, right? Because if you can slowly put the data up and train your models, and it happens once a year, and some things move very slowly in ag, and you don't need to have that kind of learning on the edge. It's not an OK Google kind of situation, right? So, I think you'll get more of a mix as the technology evolves.
So I wanted to actually just push back a little bit because I have a different point of view. So you mentioned very thoughtfully that it's almost like a race, right, in terms of 5G edge computing and how fast that we can get there. And the question in my mind is, do we need to? So I think one of the beauty of nature and farming and agriculture is the elasticity within it. So for example, if I added a bit more fertilizer today, the soil naturally kind of degrades, as long as it's not overly too much. But if we're using our common sense and say, okay, this is how much we're putting in fertilizer, this is how much we're watering, this is when I will put more, for example, heating supplies around my greenhouse. This is roughly the times of year that I will do action A, B, and C. So I think the nature can adjust itself if it's within that range. And I think that range, that as we all agree, or most of us will agree, it's quite wide. So my question and perhaps my pushback is most of the edge computing data inside AI softwares and solutions, do we have to play that speed game? This is, again, as one of you mentioned, this is not in the ER room. This is not in the military service that 1 second matters. So that's always the question that I consider is when we're creating the solution, we're creating the technology, does it truly matter? Is that needed and wanted by the farmer and for the farmer? So that is my pushback to the panel. And again, of course, context matters, specific company matters, specific company and their technology matters. But I do view that our agriculture system, our planet, our Mother Nature has that flexibility, and we may not need to get to a spot. We may not need edge computing or AI to process a lot of the data. So that is my 2 cents, and I'm curious to hear everyone else's things. And Vincent, one of the gentlemen told me that I need to grill you, so here I am.
It's interesting. That's very much in the thread that you were saying earlier of the problem of people finding a technology or people finding this is a solution, I need to go find a problem for it, right? Of there's a question of how much value are we getting from being able to get second-to-second processing, and is it worth what we're investing? Yeah, I'm curious to hear from the panel here.
I have a comment on that, so but you're pushing back, I'm going to push back as well. I think real time, hard real time, being able to process everything in real time is probably overkill. I agree. When it comes to watering trees and putting inputs, you're not making decision by the second or anything like that. I agree with that. There are domains and fields at Terramera we specialize in understanding the soil health, for example. And that is done by going into the field and sampling the soils in different locations. And that process itself is very time consuming. It's very labor intense. You have to send people the knee into the mud, and then they collect those samples. By the end of the day, they have raw hands, and then they're bleeding, literally. We've done that as well, and then we ended up in the same situation. And after that, you bag all those samples and you send them to labs. It takes weeks, actually, to reach those labs. And then because everybody is doing that at the same moment, actually, you will have to wait for months in order to get your results. And based on the results, you will have to extrapolate those results in order to create maps. And then eventually, you will be able to take a decision on how to use that information in order to put your next year fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides, everything. And that process in itself takes between weeks and months. So having a bit of real time, and then when you compare that to weeks and months, being real time is can you deliver that information in a matter of a day or 2 days or something like that? And then I think that's what can be increased or improved drastically with the technology, being able to do some computation at the edge or in the cloud in real time, pseudo real time, soft real time, within a matter of days. Actually, that's really a game changer. So now you can use that information and make those decisions way in advance. So you can even wait for the price of something to go down or change, and you have some times to decide. Whereas without those technology, actually, you have to wait for a long time in order to be able to make those decisions. And it's now the last moment where you can make those decisions. So I think it's debatable. Yeah.
Great example. And I think here's the difference, which is Vincent and his team clearly identified where the issue was, where was the pinpoint. Because it's not at the front line, it's not at the top of the funnel, it's at the end, with the labs and then partners. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing.
I want to ask a question here, talking about like what you're talking about optimizing, or like the soil health and the, I think I looked over the site and there's like carbon in the soil and whatnot, and tying that in. What do you all see as ways in which some developments in AgTech can help with getting like reliable and robust farming with all the changes that we're seeing through climate change?
Is this the time to bring up carbon credits? So yeah, carbon credits, I think the purpose there is to try and create an incentive to have investment in things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So things that take out carbon out of the atmosphere, or practices that would replace a coal-fired gas plant with a solar farm or a wind farm. And yeah, agriculture does have a role to play in that. There could be a carbon credit platform that looks to track and compensate farmers to do practices that would reduce and sequester carbon through the way they farm. I think the challenge there with a hypothetical carbon platform for agriculture would be how to properly track, I think, what is being done and exactly what tonnage of CO2 is not being emitted, or what tonnage of CO2 is being sequestered, and making it very easy for the grower or the farmer to, not drastically change their operating structure, but giving them very, easy things to do, easy changes to their operation, and then finding a way to track that, account that, and then compensate them for that. And then the final thing would be making the compensation dollar amount significant enough to incentivize that work.
Yeah, I think the carbon market's still very immature, and as we've talked about before, growers, they have 40 seasons in their lifetime, and so for them to make investments is a big deal to that, and even being sustainable, when you look at kind of the money that gets invested into it, all comes out of their pocket, and most growers will tell you it's not a cash cow, right? And so I think when you look at how we get sustainable and how tech adoption goes, it all goes down to those few dollars that the growers are looking at in their margins. And so that's the squeeze right now. And yeah, inflation, price of food's going up, but commodity prices have gone down, right? So growers are getting less money while we're spending more. And so who's going to pay for it? Carbon might be one way to do it. It's still early days, and we'll see how that plays out. But at the end of the day, are we willing to spend the money to eat more sustainable food? And the answer for the majority of consumers, at least within the Western world, is no. And so that's the big kind of gotcha, is that you can't afford to grow food sustainably for a lot of these growers, and we're not willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a point there. Like a lot of these small family farms, it could be, 2 people running the farm with, occasional influx of support labor throughout the year. The incentives to create like high quality, sustainable food is not really there, because I don't think from what I've heard, the consumer is not really ready to pay for it. When you can go to Walmart and buy food there for significantly cheaper, compared to paying X times per pound of very sustainably farmed meat, vegetables, etc. So I think the incentive structure is off, as well as consumer willingness to consumer willingness to pay the farmers who are doing these things are seemingly better for the environment and for agriculture.
Alrighty. Oh, okay.
I'm wondering, there are several things around the carbon credits, and can you live with that? Is that good enough for people to invest into regenerative agriculture, for example, and spend efforts in regenerating their soils in order to sequestrate more carbon? One big flaw of the current system is that when you want to get carbon credits, you're paid on the lower range of the uncertainty when you measure carbon into your soils. So basically, if I'm telling you you have 100 grams of carbon, the margin is so huge, actually, it's plus or minus 60 grams. So you're going to get paid for the 40 grams, actually, the lower part of that range. I'm exaggerating the numbers, but that's basically the idea. So if you could come up with a technology that reduces this uncertainty when measuring the carbon present in the ground, actually the amount of money that people would make out of the carbon sequestrated in their soil would be much higher. So that's one of the things I think AgTech can help with, coming up with new sensors that are way more accurate to solve that issue and then generate a way to verify the carbon sequestrated into the soils. At the moment, the way the protocols are designed, they're focusing mainly on the first layers, the top layers of the soils, basically, where the biological activity is pretty high and it's very seasonal. But this is actually not where the carbon is sequestrated. The carbon is being sequestrated at lower and deeper underneath, below 1 meter. This is where the real sequestration occurs. And then in order for that to occur, you have to take care of the first layers first and then make sure that you're regenerating those top layers in order to really create that carbon. So there are plenty of issues with the current way the carbon credit and the carbon market is designed. Verification is one issue, but I think AgTech can come up with ways actually to really improve the way that business is done. And so yeah, developing sensors is probably one of the most important things for that kind of activities, I think.
Any startup founders in the crowd, that's a problem that you could jump on?
And if I could add one thing here, so we have companies like Delta Airlines who pledge to offset 100% of the carbon they're emitting. I'm pretty sure Shell did something similar, but I may be wrong there. So there are billions of dollars going into these sustainable practices. So if we could find a way to direct that money to agriculture, there could be another revenue stream for the grower. But I think, yeah, right now we're not even close to it. But that being said, there are I think around 30 plus carbon markets out there. So there's definitely competition, but no one has seemingly tied agriculture and carbon markets successfully, which incentivize everyone properly yet. So innovation, can still be made there.
I want to open the questions up here to questions from the audience, and I will try to remember to repeat them for on stream. Ford, go ahead.
Yeah, this is addressed to anybody in the panel. If you look at a lot of things like vertical greenhouses and greenhouse automation and precision agriculture in that area, it strikes me that they're kind of going after the low-hanging fruit by choosing to automate types of crops that, like herb gardens and lettuce and everything, that's not very labor intensive. But you look at crops like tomatoes, where it's much more labor
for the people on stream, that's
That's why I'm a bit wordy there. But
yeah. I'll try to summarize it of like, should we be looking at? We're seeing a lot of automation in like vertical farming and whatnot on relatively low labor intensity crops. Should there be more of a focus on high labor intensity crops and figuring out how to automate that?
Take a really great question. Thank you, sir. Here's my personal take, and I wanted to. So how I look at it is impact, and that's why I've been listening a little bit even to the previous question on carbon credit, and I was thinking, why are we even talking about carbon credit? Because I think thank you. Right? Like, and I think the potential of AgTech and food tech in terms of supporting our climate movement is limitless. This is a potential, as one of them mentioned. You know, agriculture accounts a major percentage of how much our fresh water is being used against us. It is the biggest carbon sequestration platform on the planet in terms of taking carbon dioxide from the air. And I think, as an industry, as a community, I even wanted to, that's why I thought, you know, why we're talking about carbon, like why shouldn't we talk about the impact, whether it's the amount of carbon reduction that we are able to take, the amount of impact that we can create to truly reverse engineer climate change, the rising temperature and the rising sea level. And then to go back to your question, the reason that I mentioned impact driven, whether it's environmental or carbon or climate impact or financial impact, I mentioned impact-driven from the perspective of, if we look at any scalable technology that really changed how we live, work, and stay studied nowadays, it's really about changing the world, making an impact, and then make money the second. And then if you're able to scale a company at a global level and scale a technology at a global level, you've got to make money. Like that profit model is intuitive, and it's a byproduct, like making a profit and of course return to investors, return to the founder, paying employee, all of those become a byproduct of being able to scale a company at a global level. So my 2 cents to answer your question is, I actually disagree with, you know, how most of the vertical farming or urban farming technologies have been focusing on the low-hanging fruits, which is a leafy plants, right? And I think I understand they may be facing different pressures. They may need to, you know, just really get some revenue from grocery store, from, you know, daily consumers like you and I, to get their revenue going. I do understand it's a really heavy job. It's a tough job to do, but I do think if entrepreneurs in the vertical farming space can really think of the other way around, okay, target the tomatoes or target, you know, the crops that we actually eat, the barleys, right? They can really make an impact, and then making money is a natural byproduct of having a globally scaled or a nationally scaled technology. So sorry, I do understand you self-prepared prepared the question, but when I was thinking about carbon credit, it gives me that that sense.
There was another question from a gentleman there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was curious about, like, AgTech is a massive ecosystem, you know, with big players who owns places. Like John Deere's now going to become an internet company. How do you guys, as technology startups, break in and work within that ecosystem of players? I think there was and I take this from the fact that, like, I was looking online, or there was a site, I think farmers still buy 80% of their, like, consumable inputs in person. And that has not changed with COVID. So if you want to think about how all of our buying habits have changed, like, how do we then break into an ecosystem that's still super conservative and is like, I like my tractor and I'll spend $1 million on that, but it needs to work in that expensive, like, first system.
So I guess for the people on the stream, that was like, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, was like agriculture is dominated by very big players like John Deere, and there's also a relatively conservative trend in terms of how farmers approach, like, their purchasing habits with buying stuff in, like, buying all, like, 80% of their feedstock components in person. How do you break into that industry as a startup?
I guess how have you guys successfully done it? Because, like, you know, Terramera and Semios, you guys have large, like, there's deployments with regards to that. How, like, have you put, like, what's your tips with regards to those successes?
So I joined Semios just after their first commercial season. I do know in the first couple of years there was relationships with retailers. Most growers, the 80%, they'll deal with their local retailer when it comes to buying tech and inputs, fertilizer and things like that. This is a decade ago, so it did not go well. It was fraught because, again, the retailer is only worried about their margins. They're not incentivized to be in your corner. So if something breaks or something goes wrong, you're going to be thrown under the bus. So Semios pivoted to a direct model back then and started selling direct to growers and focused on that, invested heavily in that. It was hard and it was very different, and it made some enemies within the space. And so it's very expensive. So I don't know if I would recommend that, but that was kind of how we got a lot of our footprint in Washington, California. So we currently have a couple 100,000 acres on the western seaboard, and they're all direct. And I think the hard part is again, we need to be able to run a business, right? And if a retailer wants to take a margin, we can't make a business. And so going direct was kind of our path. But when you start scaling globally, as we've started to do, we have acquisitions who have gone through agronomists and retails. That is a way to scale, but you got to look at your finances. It doesn't make sense, especially looking to the next few years of investment's going to be much harder to get. Money's going to be harder to get. So it is, if you are in the AgTech space for the next few years, it's going to be rough going. But if you can survive the next few years and make some money or build a business, you're going to be well on your way, I think.
I would agree with that. And so first step is, selling to the grower, which I really do like the direct-to-grower model, mostly because you are there to help facilitate the transition, in this case to technology. You're able to help be there to set it up and hear the problems that are going on. But also, after the grower is using your technology, there's a lot of things they can do. Growers, can get a lot of things done, and they can figure a lot of things out. But at the same time, they're not going to. They're very busy, very busy, and they're not going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out why this device isn't turning on, or why the data isn't showing up in their dashboard. They'll either stop using it and not tell you until the end of the season, or they'll just be looking for a phone number to call, and they'll want someone to come like the next day and fix it for them. Like that is the current expectation. And if there's some way to shift some of the purchasing that a grower does away from these in-person stores, I think that would be something interesting to explore. I personally don't really, it's not obvious to me how you're going to convince a grower to shift away their purchasing from these in-person stores, because it's such a relationship-based purchase. These stores also act as little advisors. So the guys that work at the irrigation store or the fertilizer, the fertilizer store, or the whatever agriculture, distributors in your area, they're also kind of advisors. They tell you what other growers are doing in your area, and they recommend things that other growers have told them. So it's like a little bit complex, but I think that is kind of something that is unsolved. A way for growers to be able to purchase and test things online, or through some other means.
And I think the big barrier you alluded to is what happens when it breaks, right? Because if they know their buddy down the store at the retailer or the irrigation store, they know who to call, they know who to complain to come get down and fix it. If you're a tech company and you're selling it through a website, are you going to have the boots on the ground in that geographical location? Because it is probably a physical problem. They could have just ran into it with their truck, right? Which happens all the time to our stuff, right? Like we'll get calls and say, "Oh, our tractor knocked over your pole and your device is on the ground," right?
We'll say, "Come fix it, please."
Yeah, come fix it. I'm not going to pay for you to fix it, right? And so we have field services in every place we're commercial. So we have warehouses, we're storing our equipment, and we have hundreds of people during the growing season all up and down the western seaboard to go and install and maintain and monitor everything that we have. It's very expensive.
To
Two tangible, two quick ideas or tips. Daniel, if I heard your question correctly, so two organizations that I have find very useful if you're trying to enter more Canadian cities or Canadian regions is the NSERC advisory team. So basically, I heard they have about 500 to 600 advisors across Canada in deep communities where they are connected with local producers, local suppliers, the channel partners. And I think if you are able to target and find one person in the market that you're entering, they can really just be that. If I borrow what you said, low-hanging fruit, like if you seize one of them, they can help you open a lot of doors. If you're a Canadian company but trying to enter the American market, I find the Government of Canada trade commissioners extremely helpful. They have a few of them in each major states, especially the Middle East, which is where most of the agricultural movements are. So they will host events, curated investor meeting that they will fly Canadian entrepreneurs to the States. So those are two very quick recommendations to help you open more doors when it comes to business development.
And we use both.
All right, we got time for one more question here. I'm gonna go with you up in the front.
Hi, I'm a writer for the Vancouver. Awesome, yeah, thank you. So I don't have to yell. I'll just stand over here. Awesome, yeah, I'm a writer for the Vancouver Tech Journal. I cover climate and AgTech, so if you are interested, subscribe, it's free. We've talked about all the companies that are sitting here, so.
They're great. I'm a subscriber. Highly recommend.
Thank you. So I do want to ask about the climate piece, so I'm glad that you brought it up. We're watching kind of the pillars of tech crumble around us, but climate tech is going really strong. BDC has announced like a huge funding announcement for climate tech ventures. COP in Egypt has just ended. There's a lot of momentum around trying to come up with technology that can adapt to climate change or mitigate or removing carbon emissions. And so my question to the panel here is, I'm wondering to play more into the AgTech piece of that. What AgTech have you seen is missing in terms of adapting to climate change or mitigating climate change? Perhaps, yeah, I'm not sure how much the founders want to speak to problems that you're already solving, but I'd love to hear about the gaps and perhaps sow some seeds for folks here in the audience who are interested in solving some of these problems.
I think adapting and mitigating are two different things for growers. Not word that correctly, sorry. I think the adapting to climate change has actually driven a lot of growers to be open to technology. I think that has opened the door and given growers who traditionally wouldn't maybe take a risk, because the rate of change within their orchards and the extremity of the events are causing them serious financial damage. And so there is an incentive there for them to experiment, and that's where you start seeing IoT graveyards in growers' farms, because they will experiment on this corner and that corner, and then when it doesn't work, they'll move on to the next thing. They'll try out that drone company, they'll try out the different pieces. So I do think that does open the door, because growers, it's getting harder and harder every year, and the rate of change and the unpredictability, like the Farmer's Almanac is not as reliable as it used to be, right? Growers used to just go by their gut. They would pick up the soil and they say this feels like it was 10 years ago, so I think the events are going to happen in this way. That's not true anymore. They can't predict what's going to happen. So I think that has opened for us, and I think for other companies. And then I think for mitigation, the big push and piece is that it's being forced upon them, right? When you look at kind of the water in California and Sigma and what's happening around there, is that there are growers who are literally abandoning their fields because they can't afford the water. And so they've literally walked away from millions of dollars of investment. And then the growers who have water rights that they inherited because their great-grandfather settled that area and it's the land of the free, and so you can't touch my water, they will pump every last drop out of there and make billions of dollars of it. I won't name names, but there are a few families in California who do that. And then you have the growers who are in the middle, right, who are just trying to pay the per thing. And so I think that's where it opens the opportunity for precision irrigation, the watering, the watching of the water, and kind of the health of the tree, and trying to really tune that into only water what I need to water, instead of kind of pump and hope for the best, or because water is very emotional for California growers, so they'll just put as much as they possibly can on.
So, with climate change, we have more unexpected events. So we can think of things like heat waves, frost events, storms, pests, and helping a grower predict when these events happen. They have solutions to these things, but helping them predict when they're going to happen, they'd be able to, direct resources to the most critical areas of their farm first. You can think of in a heat wave, there are some varieties of crops that are going to die before another variety. So they'd want to apply water there first. So I guess, being able to decrease risk in these extreme events, they do happen, is one area where AgTech can help. It's like, prediction. Prediction is like one of the areas. Sensing would be another area. Control another. So that's my thought, and it's what we do at Verdi as well. So when a heat wave is incoming, we can help advise the grower on what areas of their field they should irrigate first, and with our control system, that's all done automatically as well.
Well, I have a comment on that. Watering a soil that cannot retain water is useless. So I think the foundational things we should look at is soil health. And this is something that is very hard to assess. Soil health, there is no index, there is no measurements. So it's a composite set of parameters that you have to understand in order to express a level of health. Soil health is definitely very important. It brings sustainability, continuity, net zero target, zero land conversion. It brings all sorts of benefits, actually. So taking care of the soils and regenerating the soils, and having some tools actually to measure how healthy the soils are is something that is missing at the moment. There are companies like Terramera that are working on it, if you're interested. But it's a very complex material. Soils are very, very complex, and making sure that actually we take care and invest in those soils and then in soil health is probably the most important things for climate change. Soils are the way you produce your food, but it's also the way you produce the food for the animals that you're eating as well. Some of us, not all of us. It's as I said, it's a foundational asset that we need to take care of. If we don't do that very rapidly and then change the way we deal with soils and how we treat soils, actually, we only have like 60 harvests left in front of us before it's completely gone, and all the topsoils are eroded and then dead, basically. So I think something that is missing, but again, there are companies working on it, is being able to give soil health assessment to people so that it can use that as a way to understand what to do next, and then where you want to apply your fertilizers and inputs, generally speaking, but also reduce them in order to improve the soil quality, the soil granularity, and then the water, retaining more water, etc., etc. So it's about water management in the end, but it goes through the soils. Basically, the soils are filtering the waters. They're vital for any beings on Earth. So that's the gap that I think we should really address in the coming years, basically.
Alrighty, I think we're going to have to cap here. Madison, do I hand it over to you for the announcements and whatnot? Alrighty. All right.
And I think like understand maybe the story of where your food comes from. That's my point there.
Thank you for asking that, and I think it's a good segue to mention, like, the first question that I answered today was what excites me at the to wake up in the morning, do the job that I do, is that educational piece, that awareness, that consumer engagement. We have seen a lot of cultivated meat companies lately in the food tech and AgTech space, but with the consumers, and would that help our growers, right? And how do we think about those questions? So really great question to raise at the end of the session. And I think everyone's effort counts in this movement.
I think it's we should be educating ourselves as consumers in everything we purchase, and that's the first step. And you'll quickly learn that the distance your food travels is a big one, and that the headlines that you read are all spin to get to influence your spending, but not often in the right way and with the growers in mind, right? So when you look at kind of manufactured meat versus regenerative meat, there are ways that you don't have to be a vegetarian necessarily to eat sustainably, and if you choose to, more power to you. But there are alternative avenues, and so I think just educate, learn about, again, what's organic and what is actually certified. Like it's just such a mess that you have to dig deeper, because a lot of these labels that get put on are merely to influence consumers, but it is actually not really true, right? Like when you go back to the growers, organic blocks are like non-organic blocks. They spray just as much on organic blocks as they do on a non-organic block. And so I think it's just education, and then be willing to step up when you learn, right? Like it costs more money to eat more sustainably. It costs, but it shouldn't. Like if your food's coming from China, why is that cheaper than when it's coming from the farmer down the road?
Yeah, and like I think we do need the consumers. Something needs to help educate and convince consumers to spend more money on their food to get a better product. And of course, the massive farms have economies of scale as well, so that is definitely helping them to keep their costs low. But it's very hard to be a farmer. It's not super hard for everyone, but I think for most people, it is very hard to be a farmer, just because you've done all this work, you've worked 15 hours in the day, and then nobody wants to pay you the very fair price for what it costs you to produce it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. All right, can I get a round of applause for our fantastic panelists here? All right, I'll hand things over to Madison here.
Thanks, Tony. There were a couple questions that came into the live chat towards the very end, but maybe what I'll do for tomorrow, when I post to LinkedIn, I'll kind of drop them into a post, and then I'll tag our speakers, and if anybody wants to kind of start a conversation or address them, like, you're absolutely welcome to. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This was one of our largest hardware meetups ever. And yeah, we're very pleased with the turnout for this evening. This is in the wrong order. That was in the wrong order. So I wanted to give a huge round of applause to our host, the Home Key. This is our second event that we've hosted here. Traditionally, we host our hardware meetups at the MistyWest office, which works as well, but we cannot really accommodate this many attendees, so that's why we wanted to move to this venue, and the Home Key has been beyond accommodating and make this exceptionally smooth and easy for us, so thank you so much, Jonathan and Claire. Yeah. Yeah, right there. So yeah, if you're interested in hosting events here, you should definitely talk to those two over there. Can I go backwards? Because I had that. No backwards. Okay, we can only go forward. Backwards. Okay. Assuming Rama's still here, if there's anybody interested in joining the MistyWest team, please talk to Rama. Rama, do I see you? Are you still here? If Rama's not here anymore, there's Lee Christie right there. He's the co-founder of MistyWest, so you could just come at him about everything. I'll get to you in a second, sir. And if you have a topic suggestion, if you want to speak at a meetup, if you would like to be a sponsor for the Vancouver Hardware Meetup, you can feel free to come and speak to me as the organizer, and we can talk about that for a future event, because we're always looking for people to partner with, and we're very excited to meet others who are excited about the Vancouver Hardware Meetups. And as far as announcements go, Lee, if you would like to go, you can go first.
Yeah, so Madison already mentioned that Rama is our main head recruiter, and I don't know. Raise your hand if you've met or talked to Rama. Oh, she's here. Okay, sweet. All right, yeah, cool. All right, awesome. Okay, I was worried we were gonna lose it. Do you want to say a few words? I'll do it. Okay, yeah, all right. Okay, I'll do it this time. I'll do it. Oh, shucks. Thanks everybody for coming. Many of you know me, and some of you actually have never met me in person, but I've had pretty lengthy conversations with probably half the room on LinkedIn. And so it's, don't be shy. If you've never met me in person, come up and say hi. I'm here for, I think my wife wants me home by 9, so I got a bit of time. And the reasons why I've been blitz rigging on LinkedIn lately is because we're hiring again. I know we're going into a recession, and I know that seems kind of crazy, but for some reason, when large companies put hiring freezes on and they start laying people off, they reach out to MistyWest to help them with all the work that they can no longer do. This is a very real phenomenon, and we're going to need a lot of help to do this. And so in particular, we need RF engineers, FPGA engineers, firmware engineers with knowledge of bare metal, RTOS, and embedded Linux. And we really are looking for hardcore EE engineers that can work with Miro and Dan Law, who's here tonight. They are massively overloaded with designing electronics in Altium. So if you're good at that, or you know someone who is, that's what we're recruiting for hardcore right now. So yeah, don't be shy. Reach out to a Westie. There's tons of Westies here. If you're a Westie, raise your hand. Yeah, and long-term contractors, raise your hand. Yeah, okay, cool. So don't be shy. Reach out to a Westie, and yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Lee. And one last little announcement here. MistyWest has set up we have the hardware for the Misty SOM that we were developing with Renesas out at the front, and my colleague Ron is the one that can answer your questions about it. There's a banner set up next to it, so you will see it. So please feel free to talk to him about this project that we're working on. And I'd like to hand it over for announcements to anybody else here. I think, Roman, you've got your setup out there as well, right?
I think so, and we have... Awesome. And we have 3 members of the Verdi team here, the engineering team. So we're happy to answer any questions. We'll have some of our hardware here, our web applications as well. So I think we have a table.
Yeah, and so that is pretty much it. We got a bit more refreshments out there because we ran out before as the panel discussion started. So there's a bit more out there, and yeah, feel free to stick around for the next hour. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our live streamer, Martin, for making it possible for everybody online. And that is it. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.